Sleeping on duty? You're fired. 3 seconds. That's how long it took Robert Williams to destroy Alicia Kimes's life. But in the 30 seconds that followed, as she answered a call from her dying mother and promised to pick up insulin she could no longer afford, he heard something that would haunt him. The sound of someone who'd just lost everything, still protecting someone else. The corridor was silent. The termination was final. But Williams made a choice that would cost him millions and change everything. He asked one question. What time did you clock in? Welcome, my beautiful family. Before we begin, please subscribe. Like this video and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Your support will help us bring more wonderful stories, and trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now, let's get into the story. That night, in his corner office, overlooking the glittering city skyline, Williams pulled the security footage. The timestamp read 5:47 a.m. The corridor on level 28 was empty except for a gray cleaning cart and a woman in a black jumpsuit, her back against the wall, eyes closed. 6 minutes. He watched the seconds tick by on the screen. 5:47, 5:48, 5:49. At 5:53, she jerked awake, straightened, and reached for her mop. At 5:54, he entered the frame. 6 minutes that ended a job. Williams leaned back in his leather chair, the kind that cost more than most people earned in a month. The footage was clean, incontrovertible. Company policy was clear. Sleeping on duty equaled immediate termination. No warnings, no exceptions. The rule existed for safety, for standards, for the culture he'd spent 2 decades building. So why was he still watching? He pulled up the badge logs, the way he did when quarterly reports didn't add up. Alicia Kimes, employee ID hash 4782. Clock in, 8 p.m. previous evening. Clock out, pending. Wait, he scrolled back. Her scheduled shift ran 11 p.m. to 5 a.m., but she'd arrived 3 hours early. Williams frowned and opened the shift coverage request system, a database most executives never touched. There it was. Denise Okafor, overnight cleaner. Emergency leave requested at 7:30 p.m. Reason daughter hospitalized, suspected appendicitis. Coverage accepted by A. Kimes. He kept digging. At 5:15 a.m., another alert. Marco Reyes, morning shift cleaner. Delayed arrival. Bus mechanical failure. Estimated arrival, 6:45 a.m. The system flagged it. No coverage response logged. But Alicia hadn't clocked out at 5 o'clock. She'd stayed. 10 hours. She'd worked a 10-hour shift. Williams stood and walked to the window. The city below was waking. Cars threading through streets. Lights blinking on in apartment towers. Somewhere down there, Alicia Kimes was probably picking up insulin, trying to explain to her mother why her voice sounded tight, why she couldn't quite manage the lightness she usually forced into those calls. He returned to his desk and opened a file he'd hoped he wouldn't need to revisit. The April Facilities Memo. The subject line read, Overnight Wellness Pilot, Sleep Pod Request. He'd killed it with a single word scrawled in red ink. No. The memo resurfaced now like evidence at a trial. Facilities Manager Chen had laid out the case methodically. Overnight staff worked when the cafeteria was closed, when management was absent, when fatigue hit hardest. Rotating 15-minute rest breaks and 2 reclining sleep pods would reduce injury rates, improve retention, and cost less than the workers' comp claims they'd paid out last quarter. Williams remembered his response clearly. He'd forwarded it to legal. Their reply had been immediate and unambiguous. Precedent risk. If we formalize rest periods for one class of worker, we open ourselves to demands across all shifts. Liability exposure too high. Recommend denial. He'd denied it. Now he scrolled further. The freight elevator, the one that connected the overnight cleaning staff to the basement cafeteria, had been out of service for 6 weeks. Maintenance ticket status, parts on order, estimated repair, pending vendor response. Translation: no one with authority cared enough to expedite it. The cafeteria closure policy was easier to find. It was buried in a cost optimization spreadsheet from February. Cafeteria staffing reduced to 6 a.m. Done 8 p.m. Monday, Friday. Projected annual savings $127,000. Overnight workers were left with vending machines. Vending machines that required badge swipes, which meant every candy bar, every bottle of water, every desperate handful of peanuts was logged, tracked, categorized. Williams pulled Alicia's badge activity. There it was, 4:52 a.m. Vending machine, level 12. Purchase amount, $10.47. He zoomed in on the camera feed from that location. Alicia approached the machine, swiped her badge, selected items. 2 bottles of orange juice, a protein bar. She walked out of frame, carrying them toward the security desk. Williams switched to the security desk camera. The guard on duty, Tomas Ruiz, according to the duty log, looked up as Alicia approached. She handed him the juice and protein bar. They spoke for 30 seconds. Tomas shook his head, embarrassed. Alicia smiled, insisted. He accepted. Williams checked Tomas's shift log. He'd clocked in at 3 p.m. the previous day. He was still on duty at 5 a.m. 14 hours. The numbers were telling a story the spreadsheets never captured. A story about people holding each other up with the only currency they had. Time, kindness, $10 from a paycheck that barely stretched to rent and medicine. Williams returned to the corridor footage. This time, he turned on the audio. Static hiss. Footsteps. Then Alicia's voice, small and careful. "Hi, Mom. I can stop by the pharmacy. The insulin, right?" A pause. Her mother's voice was inaudible. But Alicia's responses painted the picture. "No, I'm still at work." Another pause. "Yes, Mom, I got enough rest. I promise." The lie. Williams replayed it. "Yes, Mom, I got enough rest." She'd said it while wiping tears, while standing in the wreckage of her terminated job, while calculating how to afford the insulin without the paycheck she'd just lost. She lied to protect her mother from worry. A mercy lie. The kind that costs the liar everything and saves the listener from the truth. He knew that lie. He'd told versions of it to shareholders. "We have capacity. The quarter is strong. We're managing the head count efficiently." Translation: his people were drowning, but admitting it would spook investors. Mercy and hypocrisy staring at each other across the glass. Williams reached for his phone and dialed HR. It rang twice before Sandra Ortiz answered, her voice clipped and professional, even at 11 p.m. "Mr. Williams? I wasn't expecting." "The Kimes termination," he said. "Hold processing." Silence. Then, carefully, "Sirs, the paperwork is nearly complete. Security already issued the exit credentials. If we reverse now—" I said hold it. "Mr. Williams." Sandra's tone shifted, the way it did when she was about to cite policy. "Zero tolerance exists for a reason. If we make exceptions, we expose ourselves to grievances. Every prior termination becomes suspect. Legal will— Let me worry about legal. Sir, with respect, this sets a dangerous precedent. The optics alone—" "Sandra." His voice was quiet, but it carried weight. "How long was she on shift?" A pause. I'd have to check the logs." 10 hours. She covered for a coworker whose daughter was in the ER, then stayed when the morning shift's bus broke down. She fell asleep for 6 minutes after 10 hours on her feet. Another pause, longer this time. I wasn't aware of the context. Neither was I, Williams admitted. Hold the termination. I'll review the file tomorrow. Mr. Williams, I strongly advise. Noted. Hold it. He ended the call and stared at the dark screen of his phone. His calendar pinged. Legal review, 8 a.m. tomorrow. Sandra had already escalated it. Of course she had. His desk phone buzzed. A text from Lara Chen, General Counsel. Heard you pause the Kimes termination. We need to talk. 7 a.m. my office. Williams didn't respond. He looked again at the frozen image on his monitor. Alicia Kimes, eyes closed, exhausted, 6 minutes from ruin. For 20 years, he'd built Williams' dynamics on a foundation of discipline, efficiency, and uncompromising standards. Rules weren't suggestions. They were the architecture that kept chaos at bay. But somewhere in the machinery of policies and protocols, people had become numbers. And numbers, he was learning, hid everything that mattered. He closed the laptop and stood. The city lights below flickered like distant warnings. Tomorrow he would face legal. Tomorrow he would justify a decision that violated every principle of consistent enforcement. Tonight, he would sit with the uncomfortable truth that 6 minutes of sleep had revealed a system designed to extract, not protect. And the woman he'd fired without hesitation had shown more leadership in a single phone call than he'd shown in a year of board meetings. The corridor would still be there in the morning, glass, light, and the echo of a question he could no longer ignore. What kind of company punishes people for being human? 3 weeks earlier, Alicia had been written up for eating on an active floor. She remembered the exact moment. 2:47 a.m., level 19, supply closet, with the door cracked open just enough to let light spill across her hands. She'd been shaking, the kind of tremor that starts in your fingers and spreads until your whole body feels like it's vibrating at the wrong frequency. Hypoglycemia. Her vision had started to blur 10 minutes earlier, stars dancing at the edges, and she knew she had maybe 5 minutes before her legs gave out. The cereal bar was in her pocket. Strawberry. She'd bought it 3 days ago and kept forgetting to eat it during her official break because her official break coincided with her mother's evening call, and she couldn't chew and reassure at the same time. She'd slipped into the closet, propped her mop against the wall like a sentinel, and unwrapped the bar with trembling fingers. 4 minutes. That's how long it took to eat, to let the sugar hit her bloodstream, to stop feeling like the floor was tilting beneath her feet. That's when Security Supervisor Brennan found her. Kimes. His voice was flat, bureaucratic. You know the policy. No food consumption on active floors. She'd tried to explain. The freight elevator was broken, the cafeteria was closed, her blood sugar had dropped, but policy didn't have a clause for biology. The write-up was filed by 3:15 a.m. The consequence arrived 2 weeks later. Ineligible for quarterly performance bonus. Amount forfeited, $350. $350 she'd already allocated to her mother's medication refill. Now, standing in her apartment at dawn after the termination, Alicia stared at the note still taped to her refrigerator. It was written in her own handwriting, a budget itemized with the precision of someone who couldn't afford miscalculation. Rent, $1,100. Utilities, $180. Mom's dialysis copay, $600. Insulin, monthly. $420 groceries, $200. Bus pass, $75. Total, $2,575. Paycheck after tax, $2,640. Margin, $65. The quarterly bonus would have changed the math. Would have meant she could buy her mother the blood pressure medication the doctor kept recommending, the one that wasn't covered by Medicaid. would have meant Alicia could eat something other than rice and eggs for dinner. She pulled the note off the fridge, folded it once, twice, until it was small enough to fit in her palm. Then she sat at the kitchen table, a wobbly IKEA relic she'd found on the curb 3 years ago, and tried to calculate a future that no longer included a paycheck. Her phone buzzed. A text from Denise. "Heard what happened. I'm so sorry. If I hadn't called in." Alicia typed back quickly, "Not your fault. Your daughter needed you. I'm glad she's okay." She didn't mention that covering Denise's shift had cost her everything. What would be the point? Denise would drown in guilt, and guilt didn't pay insulin bills. Across the city, in the security office on level 2, Tomas Ruiz was staring at his own phone. The message from Williams Dynamics HR had arrived an hour ago. "Please provide incident report, RE, employee hash 4782, A. Kimes, sleeping on duty, 1009. Include relevant observations and context." Tomas had written the report mechanically, the way he'd been trained. At approximately 5:54 a.m., observed employee hash 4782 in apparent sleep state, corridor 28B. CEO Williams arrived on scene. The employee was awake when I arrived to escort. No resistance. Professional conduct throughout. But now, alone in the dim glow of the monitor wall, he remembered something else. 4:52 a.m. Alicia approaching the vending machine. He'd been 14 hours into his shift, running on black coffee, and the stubborn belief that overtime would eventually add up to something better. His head was pounding. His stomach was empty. He'd skipped dinner because the cafeteria closed at 8 p.m., and the vending machines on level 2 had been restocked with nothing but chips and candy bars. Then Alicia appeared, carrying 2 bottles of orange juice and a protein bar. "You look like you could use this," she'd said, setting them on his desk. He'd tried to refuse, embarrassed that his exhaustion was that visible, but she'd insisted with the kind of gentle firmness that didn't leave room for argument. "I know what 14-hour shifts feel like," she'd said. "Take it." He'd thanked her. She'd smiled, tired but genuine, and gone back to her cart. He hadn't reported the kindness. It seemed too small, too personal for the machinery of corporate logs, but the badge system had recorded it anyway. Employee hash 4782, $10.47, vending machine purchase. Now, Tomas wondered if anyone reviewing the logs would see it for what it was, or if they'd just see another line item in a spreadsheet, another transaction stripped of meaning. He added a line to his report. Employee hash 4782 has consistently demonstrated professionalism and consideration toward staff. No prior issues observed. It felt inadequate, but it was all he had. In HR, Sandra Ortiz was preparing the termination file with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 100 times before. The document was templated, clinical. Employee name, Alicia Kimes. Employee ID, hash 4782. Position, custodial services, overnight shift. Termination date, October 10, 2025. Cause, violation of policy, 4.7. B. Sleeping on duty, severability, immediate final paycheck, issued per state law, within 72 hours. Sandra attached the camera footage, time-stamped and annotated. She attached the badge logs showing the clock-in and scheduled shift parameters. She attached the policy manual excerpt, highlighted in yellow. It was airtight, clean, defendable. She was formatting the exit interview questions when her office door opened without a knock. Robert Williams stood in the doorway, his brown suit jacket unbuttoned, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Williams." Sandra stood quickly. "I wasn't expecting—" "The Kimes file," he said. "Walk me through the context." Sandra hesitated, then pulled up the documents on her screen. Employee hash 4782 was found sleeping on duty at 5:54 a.m. on level 28. Zero tolerance policy mandates immediate termination. The footage is clear. She was non-responsive for approximately 6 minutes before waking. "What else?" Williams asked. Sandra frowned. "Sir? What else is in the file? Shift logs, coverage records, badge activity. Those aren't typically included in termination files. The policy violation is sufficient for—" "Pull them!" Sandra's fingers moved across the keyboard, her jaw tightening. She opened the shift coverage system, the overnight logs, the badge transaction history. Williams leaned over her desk, reading in silence. Sandra watched his expression shift, not dramatically, but enough to notice. A tightening around his eyes, a slow exhale. "She worked 10 hours, he said quietly. "That's not standard," Sandra admitted. "But voluntary overtime doesn't negate the policy violation. She bought food for a security guard who'd been on duty for 14 hours. I see that, but she was written up 3 weeks ago for eating a cereal bar in a supply closet. Lost her quarterly bonus." Sandra's screen showed the disciplinary record. She'd seen it when preparing the file, but hadn't considered it relevant. Policy was policy. "Sir, the eating on active floors rule exists for sanitation and—" "The freight elevator was broken," Williams interrupted. "The cafeteria was closed. She has hypoglycemia." He straightened, his voice hardening. "We punished her for not fainting." Sandra opened her mouth, then closed it. The logic was sound, but the system didn't account for logic like that. "Mr. Williams, if we reverse this termination, we set a precedent. Every future disciplinary case will point to this exception. The floodgates, the floodgates," Williams repeated slowly. "That's your concern? That other employees might expect context to matter?" "Sir, consistency is how we avoid litigation. Zero-tolerance policies protect the company from claims of favoritism, or they also protect us from accountability." Williams stepped back from the desk. "Hold the termination. I'm ordering a full review." "Mr. Williams, I must advise against—" "Noted." He turned toward the door, then paused. "How much was the bonus she lost?" Sandra checked the file. $350. Williams was quiet for a long moment. Then, "That's 4 weeks of her mother's insulin." He walked out before Sandra could respond. She sat in the silence of her office, staring at the incomplete termination file. The policy was clear. The precedent was dangerous. But the numbers on her screen— $10.47, $350, 10 hours, 6 minutes— suddenly looked less like data and more like a story she'd been trained not to read. Her phone buzzed. A message from legal. "Heard about the hold. Meeting tomorrow 7 a.m. This is a liability issue." Sandra closed the file without saving. Outside, the building hummed with the morning shift arriving, people clocking in, people who trusted that the system was fair, that the rules protected everyone equally. Sandra wondered, not for the first time, if fairness and equality were the same thing, and she wondered what would happen if they weren't. The conference room at 7 a.m. felt like a tribunal. Lara Chen, general counsel, sat at the head of the table with a leather portfolio open in front of her. Beside her, Evan Cross from HR, Sandra's supervisor, had his laptop angled so Williams could see the spreadsheet glowing on screen. A decade of terminations, sorted by policy violation, each one marked upheld in green. Williams took his seat across from them. Through the glass wall behind Lara, the city was waking. Cars threading through traffic, construction cranes pivoting against the pale sky. Somewhere out there, Alicia Kimes was probably trying to figure out how to explain to her mother why the insulin would be late this month. "Thank you for meeting on short notice," Lara began, her tone precise and practiced. "We need to discuss the Kimes situation before it becomes a broader issue." "It's already an issue," Williams said. Lara didn't blink. "Then let's make sure it doesn't become a crisis. Evan, walk us through the precedent concern." Evan clicked to a new slide, a bar graph showing disciplinary actions by year. "In the past 10 years, we've terminated 47 employees under the zero-tolerance policy for safety violations. Sleeping on duty? Equipment misuse. Unauthorized breaks. Every termination was upheld. If we reverse the Kimes decision, we open ourselves to grievance claims from every one of those 47. They were all upheld because we never looked deeper," Williams said quietly. Evan hesitated. "Sir, with respect, the policy exists so we don't have to look deeper. Subjectivity creates inconsistency. Inconsistency creates litigation." Lara leaned forward. "Robert, I understand the impulse here. The optics of firing an exhausted worker who was covering for colleagues, it's not good. But the optics of reversing a termination because the CEO had a change of heart? That's worse. It looks like favoritism. It looks like the rules don't apply evenly." "Maybe they don't," Williams said. The room went still. Lara's expression didn't change. But her voice dropped half a degree. "Then we have a much bigger problem than one terminated employee." "We do," Williams agreed. "The problem is that our policies punish people for being human, for being tired, for being hungry, for covering for each other when the system fails them." Evan pulled up another document. "The sleep pod proposal you vetoed in April. Facilities estimated it would cost $85,000 to install and maintain. Legal advised against it because formalizing rest periods for one shift category creates a demand across all shifts. We're talking about potentially millions in added labor costs and exposure to claims that we're not providing adequate rest. So instead, we provide no rest and hope no one collapses," Williams said. "We provide scheduled breaks," Evan corrected. 30 minutes, unpaid per 8-hour shift. That's compliant with state labor law. "And where do overnight workers take those breaks?" "The cafeteria closes at 8. The freight elevator's been broken for 6 weeks. They eat from vending machines in stairwells." Lara tapped her pen against the portfolio. "Robert, I'm not unsympathetic, but we can't run a company on guilt. We run it on standards. If Alicia Kimes worked 10 hours, that's admirable. But it doesn't erase the fact that she violated a safety policy. If we make exceptions based on why someone violated a rule, we lose the rule entirely." Williams was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Do you remember the Memphis plant incident?" Lara frowned. "Which one?" 2019. Guillermo Santos, third-shift machinist, 53 years old. He fell asleep at a station and his hand went into a press. The room went cold. Evan's fingers stopped moving on the keyboard. Lara closed her portfolio slowly. "We settled that case," she said carefully. "We did," Williams agreed, "for $1.2 million and a non-disclosure agreement. The OSHA report cited fatigue as a contributing factor. Santos had been working mandatory overtime for 6 weeks straight. We paid his family to stay quiet, and we kept the policy that got him killed." "That's not fair," Lara said, her voice sharper now. "We implemented mandatory fatigue training after Memphis." We implemented a training video," Williams interrupted. "We didn't change the conditions that create fatigue. We just made workers sign a form saying they understood the risks. Then we blamed them when they couldn't stay awake." Evan shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, the Kimes situation isn't comparable. She wasn't operating machinery. She was resting against a wall. She was resting because she'd worked 10 hours straight in a building that doesn't give her a place to sit, eat, or pause. And when we caught her, we fired her. That's not safety enforcement, Evan. That's punishment for exhaustion." Lara leaned back, her expression unreadable. "What are you proposing?" "I'm proposing we rescind the termination. And I'm proposing we stop pretending that zero-tolerance policies protect people when they actually just protect us from accountability." "Robert," Lara's voice was measured, almost gentle, "I understand you're wrestling with this, but reversing a termination sets a precedent we can't control. Every terminated employee will claim extenuating circumstances. Every manager will second-guess enforcement. The system collapses." "Then maybe the system should collapse," Williams said. The silence stretched like a wire pulled taut. Finally, Lara closed her laptop. "If you do this, I need it in writing. A full memo explaining the rationale. And I need you to understand, if this goes sideways, if we face a wave of grievances or wrongful termination claims, the board will ask why you prioritized one employee over the stability of the entire company." "Let them ask," Williams said. At 2 a.m. the next morning, Williams walked the overnight floor. He'd told his driver to wait. He'd told security he was conducting a routine inspection. The truth was simpler and harder to admit. He'd never actually seen the building at this hour. He'd never watched the people who kept it running while he slept. Level 12. The vending machines lined one wall, glowing in the dim corridor. A janitor he didn't recognize stood in front of one, counting coins in her palm. She saw Williams, froze, then quickly walked away. Level 8. The freight elevator door was taped off with yellow caution tape and a printed sign, "Out of service. Use stairs for basement access." The basement was 4 floors down. 4 floors with a mop cart. Level 3. A maintenance worker sat on the floor, back against the wall, eyes closed, not asleep, just resting. When Williams approached, the man jerked upright, stammering an apology. "It's fine," Williams said. "How long have you been on shift?" "Since 6, sir." "Evening shift." 8 hours. Williams checked his watch. It was 2:14 a.m. "When do you clock out?" 6 a.m., sir." 12 hours. Williams nodded and kept walking. In a corner near the loading dock, he found a small break room he'd never noticed before. 2 folding chairs, a microwave that looked older than his tenure, a handwritten sign taped to the wall. "Please clean up after yourself. We all share this space." The room smelled like reheated coffee and disinfectant. On the table, someone had left a half-eaten sandwich wrapped in foil. Williams stood there, alone in the fluorescent hum, and thought about Guillermo Santos, about the hand that went into the press because a man couldn't stay awake, about the $1.2 million they'd paid to make the family disappear from the headlines, about the fact that they'd called it a settlement, not a failure. He pulled out his phone and opened a new email. To Executive Leadership. CC, Board of Directors. Subject, Policy Review and Immediate Action. His thumbs hovered over the screen. This would cost him. Not money. He had plenty of that. It would cost him credibility with the board, trust with legal, the illusion that he ran a company where every rule was sacred and every decision was clean. But the alternative was worse. The alternative was another Guillermo Santos, another Alicia Kimes, another person crushed by a system designed to protect the system, not the people inside it. He started typing. "Effective immediately, I am rescinding the termination of employee hash 4782, Alicia Kimes. After reviewing the circumstances, including shift coverage, equipment failures, and policy contradictions, I have determined that the termination was inconsistent with our stated values of safety and accountability. Additionally, I am authorizing a 3-month pilot program for overnight wellness, micro-rest rotations, accessible food options on all active floors, and a confidential hotline for reporting policies that create unsafe conditions. Funding will be reallocated from executive discretionary budgets. If fatigue is a safety risk, we mitigate it. If hunger is a safety risk, we mitigate it. We do not punish people for the conditions we create. His finger hovered over send. He thought about Lara's warning, the floodgates, the grievances, the board's inevitable questions. Then he thought about the man slumped against the wall on level 3, apologizing for being tired. He hit send. The email whooshed into the void. No taking it back now. Williams stood in the empty break room, listening to the hum of the building, the ventilation, the distant rumble of machines, the quiet breath of a company that never stopped moving. For the first time in 20 years, he wondered if motion and progress were the same thing. His phone buzzed, a reply from Lara, sent at 2:31 a.m. "We need to talk. First thing tomorrow." Williams pocketed the phone and walked back toward the elevator. Tomorrow he would face the consequences. Tonight, he would try to sleep, knowing he'd chosen oxygen over optics. It wasn't redemption, but it was a start. Alicia was back on level 28 when she saw him. She wasn't supposed to be there. The termination paperwork had been processed, or so she'd thought. Her final paycheck was scheduled to arrive in 72 hours, per state law. She'd come back only because she'd left her water bottle in the supply closet, a stupid $8 thing she couldn't afford to replace, and the night supervisor had taken pity and let her in through the service entrance. The corridor looked exactly the same. Glass walls, white light, the kind of silence that made every footstep feel like a confession. She was reaching for the supply closet door when she heard his voice behind her. "Miss Kimes." She turned slowly. Robert Williams stood 10 feet away, still in the brown suit, though his tie was loosened and his expression was something she couldn't quite read. Not anger, not pity. Something in between. "Mr. Williams." Her voice came out steady, though her heart was hammering. "I was just picking up something I left. I'll be out in—" "I need to speak with you," he said, "if you have a moment." She almost laughed. If you have a moment. As if she had anywhere else to be. As if her calendar wasn't just a blank stretch of panic and pharmacy trips. "Okay," she said. He gestured toward the windows, and they walked to the edge of the corridor where the city sprawled below them. Lights and traffic, and the hum of a world that kept moving whether you had a job or not. Williams was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I'm rescinding your termination." Alicia blinked. The words didn't land right, like they were in the wrong language. "I'm sorry? Your termination. I'm reversing it. You'll be reinstated with full back pay for the hours you worked, plus a hazard premium for the extended shift." She stared at him, searching for the catch. There was always a catch. "I don't understand." "I reviewed the logs," Williams said. "You worked 10 hours. You covered for a colleague whose daughter was in the ER. You stayed when the morning shift was delayed. The termination was—" He paused, as if testing the weight of the word. "Unjust." Alicia's throat tightened. She wanted to feel relief, gratitude, something clean and simple. But what she felt instead was a tangled knot of exhaustion and suspicion. "Why?" Williams met her eyes. "Because I was wrong." The simplicity of it almost hurt. No corporate jargon. No deflection. Just 3 words that powerful people almost never said. "I'm also offering you a transfer to the day shift," Williams continued. "Same pay rate. It would give you more stability, regular hours." "No." The word came out faster than she intended. Williams frowned. Miss Kimes, the day shift would— My mother has dialysis 3 mornings a week, Alicia said quietly. I take her. I'm the only one who can. If I work days, I can't be there. She watched his expression shift. Not frustration, but something closer to recalibration. Like he'd expected a simple solution, and was now confronting the fact that her life didn't fit into simple categories. All right, he said after a moment, then we'll build a schedule that works. What do you need? Alicia hesitated. This felt like a test, like saying the wrong thing would make the offer evaporate. I need mornings free, Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, and I need to be able to leave if there's an emergency. Williams pulled out his phone and typed something. Done. We'll create a customized overnight rotation. 4 10-hour shifts instead of 5 8s. You'll have 3 full days off, and emergency leave will be pre-approved through your supervisor. It sounded too good, too easy. What's the catch? No catch. Williams pocketed his phone. There's also a transportation stipend, $200 a month, for getting your mother to and from appointments. I know the bus routes aren't always reliable. Alicia felt something crack open in her chest. Not quite hope, but the space where hope could grow if she let it. $200 a month? It's not charity, Williams said, as if reading her hesitation. It's an accommodation, one the company should have offered a long time ago. She wanted to ask why now. She wanted to ask what changed. But the answers felt too fragile to interrogate. Instead, she said, Okay. Okay? I'll take the schedule. And the stipend. Thank you. Williams nodded, and for a moment they just stood there. A billionaire CEO and a janitor, separated by glass and salary and every structural divide the building represented, but connected by something neither of them could name. There's one more thing, Williams said. This isn't just about you. Alicia frowned. What do you mean? Williams, POV shift. He hadn't planned to tell her like this, standing in a corridor, improvising policy on the fly, but the moment demanded honesty, not performance. I'm launching a pilot program, Williams said. Overnight wellness initiative. Micro-rest rotations. Food access on all active floors, and a confidential hotline for reporting policies that create unsafe conditions. Alicia's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't speak. The freight elevator will be repaired by end of week, with a penalty clause if the vendor misses the deadline, he continued. The cafeteria will extend hours to provide at least one hot meal option for overnight staff. And we're installing rest pods. Small, private spaces where people can take a 15-minute break without being penalized. He watched her face, trying to gauge her reaction. She looked stunned, guarded, like she was waiting for the part where he'd explain why none of it would actually happen. Why are you telling me this? She asked quietly. Because you're the reason it's happening, Williams said. Not as some kind of reward, but because what happened to you, what almost happened, revealed a system that punishes people for being human. That stops now. Alicia was silent for a long moment. Then she said, People are going to say you're doing this because you feel guilty. They'd be right. She blinked, surprised by the admission. But guilt isn't enough, Williams continued. Guilt is just the feeling you get when you realize you've been complicit. The question is, what you do with it. Alicia looked down at her hands, scarred from years of cleaning chemicals, calloused from mop handles and cart pushing. A lot of people won't believe it. They'll think it's just PR, something to make the company look good. Then we'll prove them wrong, Williams said, by making it real, by following through. She met his eyes again, and this time there was something different in her expression. Not trust, exactly, but the possibility of it. I hope you mean that. So do I, Williams admitted. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. "When do I start?" Alicia asked. "Tomorrow night, if you're ready. HR will have the new schedule finalized by noon." She nodded slowly, and Williams saw the exhaustion in her posture ease just slightly. Not relief, but the easing of one variable in an equation that still had too many unknowns. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for reconsidering." "Thank you," Williams replied, "for not walking away when you had every reason to." Alicia picked up her water bottle from where she'd set it down and turned toward the elevator. Then she paused. "Mr. Williams?" "Yes?" "The people who work overnight, they're not going to trust this just because you announce it. They've been promised things before." "I know. So don't just tell them. Show them. Be here. At 2 a.m., at 4 a.m., see what it's actually like." Williams nodded slowly. "I will." She studied him for another moment, then walked away, her footsteps echoing down the glass corridor. Williams stood alone, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. His phone buzzed again, insistent. He pulled it out. "A text from Lara Chen. Just saw the email. We need to talk. Now." Another text, this one from a board member, Richard Stokes. "What the hell are you doing? Investors will revolt." A third from Evan in HR. "Legal is drafting a risk assessment. This is going to cost us." Williams stared at the messages, the weight of consequence settling over him like a familiar coat. He'd known this was coming. Known the moment he hit send that there would be pushback, panic, the grinding machinery of a system resisting change. But standing here, in the corridor where it all started, he felt something unexpected. Clarity. Not certainty. Clarity was different. Clarity was knowing the path would be hard, and choosing it anyway. He typed a response to Lara. "I know, I'm ready." Then he pocketed the phone and walked toward the elevator. Somewhere below him, the overnight shift was starting. People clocking in. People who didn't yet know that the rules were changing, that someone had finally looked at the numbers and seen the people underneath. Tomorrow, there would be meetings, confrontations, threats veiled as concern. Tonight, there was just the hum of the building and the ghost of a woman's voice saying, "Show them. Don't just tell them." The elevator doors opened. Williams stepped inside. As the doors closed, he caught his reflection in the polished steel. A man in a brown suit, graying at the temples, eyes carrying the weight of 2 decades of decisions made in service of efficiency. But maybe, just maybe, beginning to understand that leadership wasn't about having all the answers. It was about asking better questions. The elevator descended, carrying him back toward the ground floor, toward the waiting conflicts, toward a version of his company that didn't exist yet, but might, if he had the courage to build it. His phone buzzed one more time. He didn't look. The headline hit Business Insider at 6:47 a.m. Williams Dynamics CEO reverses zero-tolerance policy after firing janitor for sleeping on job. Williams saw it while drinking his first coffee of the morning, the bitter taste suddenly matching the knot forming in his stomach. He skimmed the article. Anonymous source. Internal memo leaked. Phrases like policy reversal, precedent-setting decision, and questions about leadership consistency peppered throughout. The comment section was already filling up. Finally, a CEO with a conscience. This is what happens when feelings override policy. Weak leadership. About time someone recognized that workers are human beings. Great. Now every terminated employee will claim special circumstances. Legal nightmare. His phone rang before he finished reading. Richard Stokes, board member and majority shareholder. Williams answered. "Richard, what the hell is this?" No greeting, No preamble. I'm reading that you reversed a termination and launched an expensive pilot program without board approval? The decision was within my operational authority, Williams said evenly. Operational authority doesn't extend to precedent-setting policy changes that expose us to litigation. Richard's voice was sharp, clipped. I've got 3 other board members in my inbox asking if you've lost your mind. I haven't. Then explain to me why you're willing to risk shareholder value for one employee. Williams set down his coffee cup carefully. It's not one employee. It's a system that's been punishing people for circumstances we created. Broken elevators, closed cafeterias, mandatory overtime without adequate rest. If we don't fix that, we're not just risking litigation, we're risking lives. That's dramatic, Richard said flatly. Memphis, 2019. Guillermo Santos. Williams let the name hang in the air. Silence. Then, quieter. That was settled. It was buried, Williams corrected. And the conditions that killed him are still in place. I'm not burying another one. Robert. Richard's tone shifted, became almost paternal. I understand you're trying to do the right thing, but the right thing for one person can be the wrong thing for the company. The market doesn't reward conscience. It rewards consistency. If the stock drops, if investors lose confidence, then they lose confidence, Williams said. I'd rather explain a decision I believe in than defend one I don't. Another silence, longer this time. The board is scheduling an emergency review of your compensation structure. If this blows back, your bonus is the first thing on the table. I've already reallocated it. You've, what? 12% of my annual bonus. Executive parking subsidies. That's how we're funding the pilot. Richard exhaled sharply, the sound somewhere between disbelief and frustration. You're using your own compensation to fund a policy change that might get you fired? Yes. Jesus, Robert. A pause. The shareholder call is tomorrow. If the stock dips, if analysts start questioning your judgment, I'll handle it. You better. The line went dead. Williams sat in the silence of his home office, the city visible through the window behind him. Clean, distant, insulated. He thought about the overnight floor, about the man apologizing for being tired, about Alicia Kimes budgeting $65 between survival and catastrophe. His phone buzzed with a calendar alert. Executive meeting. 9 a.m. He stood, straightened his tie, and prepared for war. The executive meeting was every bit as brutal as he'd expected. Lara Chen opened with a 12-slide presentation titled Legal Risk Assessment, Policy Reversal Implications. Each slide was a different catastrophe. Wrongful termination claims, precedent challenges, erosion of managerial authority, projected litigation costs in the millions. Every terminated employee from the past 5 years now has grounds to claim their circumstances warranted review, Lara said, her voice clinical. We're talking about 47 potential grievances. Even if we win every case, the legal fees alone will exceed the cost of the pilot program by a factor of 10. Evan from HR was next. His presentation focused on morale disruption. Managers uncertain about enforcement, employees confused about policy boundaries, the risk of creating a culture where rules felt negotiable. Consistency is the backbone of operational efficiency, Evan said. When employees believe every rule is subject to managerial discretion, you lose structure, you lose accountability. Williams listened without interrupting. When they finished, he said, "Are you done?" Lara frowned. "Robert, this isn't... Are you done presenting worst-case scenarios? These aren't worst-case. They're likely outcomes." Williams stood and walked to the window. Below, the city moved. People arriving for work. People who trusted that the buildings they entered were safe, that the companies they worked for valued their lives more than quarterly margins. "I've heard your concerns," he said quietly. "Now, hear mine. We built a system that prioritizes efficiency over safety, that punishes fatigue instead of addressing the conditions that create it, that pays out settlements to keep tragedies quiet, and then changes nothing. If that system collapses because we decided to treat people like people, then it deserved to collapse." "Robert," Lara began, "I'm not debating this." Williams turned to face them. "The pilot launches next week. The hotline goes live on Friday. And if 47 former employees file grievances, we'll review every single one and determine whether we were wrong then, too." The room was silent. "The shareholder call is tomorrow," Lara said finally. "If the stock drops, then it drops." Williams returned to his seat. Meeting adjourned. They filed out slowly, exchanging glances. Williams pretended not to see. When the door closed, he was alone. His inbox was filling with messages. He scrolled through them mechanically, expecting more threats, more warnings. Then he saw one that stopped him. Subject: "Thank you. From Marcus Chen, Plant Operations. Lead Mr. Williams. I heard about the overnight wellness pilot. I've been asking for rest rotations at the Memphis plant for 3 years. Every time I was told it wasn't cost-effective. People work tired. People make mistakes. Last month, one of my guys nearly lost a finger because he'd been on shift for 11 hours and missed a safety check. I reported it. Nothing changed, so thank you for finally listening. If you need someone to testify to the board, to investors, to anyone, I'm here." Marcus Williams read it twice. Then he opened the next email. Subject: "From the night shift, from Carmen Rodriguez. Custodial Services, Mr. Williams. I don't know if this will reach you, but I wanted to say something. I've worked overnight for 6 years. I watched my coworker Alicia get fired for something that could have been any of us. We're tired. We're always tired. But we show up because we need the job. When I heard you reversed the firing, I cried. Not because it's perfect, not because everything's fixed, but because someone finally saw us. That matters." Carmen Williams kept scrolling. There were dozens more. Maintenance workers, security guards, cleaning staff, people he'd never met, whose names didn't appear on org charts, whose exhaustion he'd never witnessed. They weren't asking for much. Just acknowledgement. Just the smallest margin of mercy. His phone buzzed. A text from his executive assistant. "Press requests are piling up. WSJ, Bloomberg, Forbes. Do you want to issue a statement?" Williams typed back, "No statement. Let the policy speak for itself." Another text, this one from Richard Stokes. "Stock down 2.3% in pre-market." "Told you." Williams stared at the number. 2.3%. In the grand calculus of markets, it was barely a blip. In the calculus of leadership, it felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. He opened his trading app. Williams Dynamics, down $1.47 per share. Analyst notes were already updating. Concerns over policy inconsistency and leadership direction. His phone rang again. He ignored it. Instead, he opened a new email. To all staff. Subject: Moving forward. He typed slowly, choosing each word carefully. This week, we made a decision that some view as risky. We reversed a termination, launched a wellness pilot, and committed to examining policies that may cause more harm than they prevent. Some of you are skeptical. Some of you are hopeful. Many of you are waiting to see if we follow through. Here's what I can promise. We will show up. We will listen. And when we find that our systems fail the people who sustain them, we will change those systems. This isn't about perfection. It's about accountability. It's about building a company where safety and humanity aren't in conflict. The shareholder call is tomorrow. The stock may fluctuate. Analysts may question our judgment. But I would rather answer to you, the people who make this company run, than to a system that treats you as expendable. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your work. And thank you for holding us accountable. Robert Williams. He read it once, hesitated, then hit send. The email disappeared into the digital ether. No taking it back now. His phone buzzed immediately. Lara, did you just send a company-wide email without legal review? Williams smiled grimly and typed back, yes. He stood and looked out at the city again. The stock was down. The board was furious. The shareholder call loomed like a reckoning, but in his inbox, between the threats and warnings, there were thank yous from people whose names he didn't know, whose faces he'd never seen, whose lives he'd almost sacrificed on the altar of efficiency. Fear transmuted into resolve. Tomorrow he would face the investors. Tonight he would sleep knowing he'd chosen the harder, right over the easier wrong. His phone buzzed one last time. A calendar reminder. Shareholder call, 2 p.m. tomorrow. Williams silenced the notification and walked toward the door. The building hummed around him, alive with people and possibility, and the stubborn belief that maybe, just maybe, a company built on rules could be governed by conscience. He'd find out tomorrow. The apartment was quiet when Alicia got home at 7:30 a.m. The kind of quiet that felt like held breath. Her mother was asleep on the pull-out couch, one arm draped across her chest, the dialysis catheter visible beneath the thin cotton of her nightgown. The TV was on, muted, playing a rerun of The Price is Right. On the coffee table, 3 prescription bottles, a blood pressure cuff, and a glass of water with a straw bent at precisely the angle her mother preferred. Alicia set down the pharmacy bag, $87.43 for a 2-week supply of insulin, paid for with money she technically didn't have yet, and stood in the doorway watching her mother breathe. This was the equation that governed everything. Keep her mother alive, keep the lights on, keep moving forward even when forward felt like walking through deep water. She opened the fridge. Inside, a carton of eggs, 6 left. A half-gallon of milk, 2 days to expiration, a Tupperware of rice, and a jar of grape jelly. The cost ledger she'd taken down yesterday was still folded in her pocket. She pulled it out, smoothed it against the counter, and added a new line in pencil. Insulin, this week, $87.43. Remaining after rent utilities, $22.43. Paycheck, reinstated, arrives Friday. Transportation stipend, $200/month, new. The numbers didn't quite make sense yet. The stipend felt like a trick, like something that would evaporate if she looked at it too closely. But for the first time in months, the ledger didn't end in red. She folded it again and tucked it into the drawer beneath the silverware. Behind her, her mother stirred. "Baby?" Alicia turned, forced a smile. "Morning, Mama. I got your insulin." Her mother's eyes opened slowly, focusing with the sluggishness of someone whose body fought every waking moment. "You didn't have to go right away. You must be exhausted." "I'm fine." Alicia crossed to the couch, sat on the edge. "How are you feeling? Like I've been wrung out and hung to dry?" Her mother's laugh was thin, papery. "But I'm still here. That counts for something. It counts for everything." Her mother reached up, touched Alicia's cheek with fingers that trembled slightly. "You look tired, baby." "I'm always tired, Mama." "No." Her mother's gaze sharpened. "This is different. What happened?" Alicia hesitated. She'd spent the bus ride home rehearsing this conversation, trying to decide how much to say. Her mother didn't need more worry, didn't need to carry the weight of Alicia's near termination, the CEO's reversal, the tenuous reinstatement that still felt like standing on glass. But her mother's eyes held that particular brand of knowing that came from raising a daughter alone, from reading silences like other people read books. "I almost lost my job," Alicia said quietly. Her mother's hand stilled against her cheek. "Almost? They fired me. Then they unfired me." "What did you do?" "I fell asleep. 6 minutes. I'd been covering for Denise. Her daughter was in the ER, and then Marco's bus broke down, so I stayed. I worked 10 hours, Mama, and I closed my eyes for 6 minutes." Her mother was silent for a long moment. Then, "And they fired you for that?" "At first, but the CEO, he looked into it. He reversed it." "The CEO?" Her mother's tone was skeptical, protective. "Just like that? Out of the goodness of his heart?" Alicia thought about Williams standing in the corridor, his voice careful when he said I was wrong. "I don't know what's in his heart, but he changed the policy. He's starting a program, rest breaks, better food access, and he gave me a customized schedule so I can still take you to dialysis." Her mother's expression softened, then tightened again. "What's the catch?" "That's what I asked." "And?" "He said there isn't one." Her mother studied her face, reading all the things Alicia wasn't saying. The fear, the suspicion, the fragile hope that maybe this time someone in power had actually seen her as human instead of expendable. "You don't believe him," her mother said. "I want to." Alicia's voice cracked slightly. "But people don't just change their minds. Not people like that. Not for people like us." Her mother pulled her close, the way she had when Alicia was small and the world felt too big. "Maybe he will. Maybe he won't. But you showed up, baby. You did your job. You took care of your coworker. You stayed when someone needed you to stay. That's not nothing. That's everything." Alicia pressed her face against her mother's shoulder and let herself feel it. The exhaustion, the relief, the weight of almost losing everything, and somehow still being here. "I also refused the day shift," she whispered. Her mother pulled back, eyes searching Alicia's face. "Why?" "Because mornings are for you. Because I'm the one who makes sure you get to dialysis, who checks your blood pressure, who knows which pills you take when. If I work days, who does that? Baby. No, Mama. You need me more than I need normal hours." Her mother's eyes filled, but she didn't argue, because they both knew it was true. Because dignity in their world meant showing up for each other when no one else would. The knock came at noon, tentative and apologetic. Alicia opened the door to find Denise standing in the hallway, holding a casserole dish covered in foil. Behind her, Marco hovered awkwardly, clutching a grocery bag. "We heard," Denise said, her voice tight with guilt, "about the firing, about everything. Alicia, I'm so sorry. If I hadn't called in—" "Stop!" Alicia stepped aside, letting them in. "Your daughter needed you. You did the right thing. But you lost your job because of me. I got it back." Denise set the casserole on the counter. Chicken and rice. Still warm. "I made too much. Thought you might— I don't know. I just needed to do something." Marco placed the grocery bag beside it. Bread, eggs, some fruit. It's not much. Alicia looked at them, these people who barely had enough themselves, showing up with what little they could spare. "You didn't have to do this." "Yes, we did," Marco said quietly. "You stayed when my bus broke down. You stayed even though you were exhausted. That's not nothing." They stood in the small kitchen, the three of them, held together by the invisible threads of mutual aid that kept people like them alive. Not charity, not pity, just the quiet, stubborn insistence that they would show up for each other because no one else would. "Thank you," Alicia said, her voice thick. "Really? Thank you." Denise hugged her, fierce and quick. Marco nodded, too shy for more. They left quietly, the way they'd come, leaving behind food and the reminder that community wasn't about having enough. It was about sharing what you had. At 3 p.m. there was another knock. Tomas stood in the hallway, out of uniform, holding an envelope. "Hey, sorry to just show up. I asked Marco for your address. Hope that's okay." "It's fine." Alicia leaned against the doorframe, suddenly aware of how small her apartment was, how worn. "What's up?" Tomas handed her the envelope. "I wanted to say thank you for the juice and the protein bar. That night, I was 14 hours in. I was barely keeping my eyes open. What you did, it helped." Alicia opened the envelope. Inside, a handwritten note on lined paper. "Alicia, I never properly thanked you. I was embarrassed that I looked that rough, that I needed help. But you saw me. You didn't have to, but you did. I testified to HR about that night, about how you take care of people even when you're exhausted yourself. I don't know if it helped, but I wanted you to know I tried. You deserve better than how they treated you." Tomas Alicia looked up, her throat tight. "You testified? I told them what I saw, that you're professional, that you look out for people. I don't know if Williams read it, but I wanted it on record." "Thank you," Alicia whispered. Tomas shifted, uncomfortable with the emotion. "Anyway, I should go. Just wanted you to know." He left before she could say more. Alicia closed the door and leaned against it, the note still in her hand. The city hummed beyond the thin walls. Sirens, traffic, the constant motion of survival. But inside, for a moment, there was stillness. Her phone buzzed, an email notification. Subject: Town Hall invitation from Williams Dynamics, HR Miss Kimes. We are hosting an all-staff town hall next week to discuss the overnight wellness pilot and solicit employee feedback. We would like to invite you to speak about your experience and perspective. This is entirely optional, but your voice would be valuable to the conversation. Please let us know by Friday if you're willing to participate. Sandra Ortiz, HR Alicia, read it 3 times. They wanted her to speak, in front of everyone, about what happened, about being fired, reinstated, about the system that almost crushed her. Her first instinct was to decline, to stay invisible the way she'd always stayed invisible, because visibility meant vulnerability, meant exposing herself to judgment and scrutiny, and the kind of attention that could turn against you without warning. But then she thought about Denise's casserole, Marco's grocery bag, Tomas's testimony. The way people had shown up for her even when showing up cost them something. Maybe visibility wasn't just vulnerability. Maybe it was responsibility. She set the phone down without responding and walked to the window. Below, the street was alive with people, walking, working, surviving. People whose names would never appear in headlines, whose exhaustion would never be quantified in quarterly reports. People like her. The town hall was in 5 days. Alicia didn't know yet if she'd say yes, but she knew she couldn't say no without thinking about what her silence would cost. Not just her, but everyone who'd ever been fired for being human. She looked at her mother, still sleeping on the couch, and thought about the cost ledger in the drawer. Some debts were measured in dollars. Others were measured in courage. The conference line connected at 2 p.m. sharp. 47 analysts, investors, and financial journalists, all waiting to hear Robert Williams explain why he'd set his own company on fire. Williams sat alone in his office, the speakerphone centered on the desk like an instrument of judgment. Through the glass wall, he could see his executive team gathered in the adjacent conference room. Lara, Evan, the CFO, all wearing expressions that ranged from grim to catastrophic. "Good afternoon," Williams began, his voice steady. "Thank you for joining today's quarterly call. Before we discuss financials, I want to address the policy changes announced this week." A pause. He could feel the collective inhale on the other end of the line. "Last week, we reversed a termination and launched an overnight wellness pilot. These decisions have generated questions about consistency, precedent, and leadership direction. I welcome those questions." The first voice came fast and sharp. David Chen, analyst from Goldman Sachs. "Mr. Williams, can you explain the rationale for reversing a zero-tolerance policy violation? Doesn't this create legal exposure and undermine managerial authority?" "It creates accountability," Williams said. "The termination in question involved an employee who worked 10 hours covering for colleagues when our systems failed them. The so-called violation was 6 minutes of rest after circumstances we created. Reversing it wasn't weakness, it was correction." Another voice, female, clipped. Jennifer Park from Vanguard. "But the optics, Mr. Williams. You're essentially saying rules don't apply when circumstances are sympathetic. How do you maintain discipline if every policy is negotiable?" "Not every policy is negotiable," Williams replied, "but policies that punish people for conditions we create. Broken elevators, closed cafeterias, inadequate rest. Those policies aren't about discipline. They're about avoiding responsibility. We're fixing that." Silence. Then David again, skeptical. "At what cost? The pilot program? The structural changes? What's the financial impact?" "Approximately $2.1 million annually, funded by reallocating executive compensation and discretionary budgets. Zero impact to operations or capital expenditure." A murmur rippled through the line. Williams could almost hear the analysts recalculating their models. "So you're using your own bonus to fund this?" Jennifer's tone shifted slightly. Less hostile, more curious. "Partially, yes. Along with executive parking subsidies and deferred office renovations. The money exists. We're just redirecting it toward people instead of perks." A new voice, harder. Marcus Feldman from a hedge fund Williams didn't recognize. "Mr. Williams, let's be frank. Are you rewarding negligence? Because that's how this looks to shareholders. An employee sleeps on the job, gets fired, and you reverse it because of a sob story. That's not leadership. That's sentiment." Williams felt the familiar tightness in his chest, the reflex to defend, to deflect, to retreat into corporate language that said nothing while sounding authoritative. Instead, he leaned forward. "No, Mr. Feldman. We're fixing risks. Fatigue is a safety risk. Hunger is a safety risk. Fear, the fear of being punished for circumstances beyond your control, is a safety risk. If we ignore those risks and then blame workers when something goes wrong, we're not managing risk. We're creating it." "That's a nice speech," Marcus said, "but the market doesn't reward nice speeches. The stock is down 3.1% since your announcement. Investors are spooked. How do you justify that?" "I don't," Williams said simply. "The market will react how it reacts. My job isn't to manage stock volatility. It's to manage a company in a way that's sustainable, ethical, and safe. If that causes short-term fluctuation, so be it." The line went quiet. Williams could hear someone typing, the faint rustle of papers. Then a different voice, older, measured. Patricia Nguyen, a long-term institutional investor. "Mr. Williams, I've been holding Williams Dynamics stock for 12 years. I've watched you build this company on discipline and standards. I'm not opposed to what you're doing, but I need to understand. Is this a one-time correction? Or are you fundamentally changing how the company operates? Williams exhaled slowly. Both. The specific termination was a one-time correction, but the systems that created the situation, those need fundamental change. We've optimized for efficiency at the expense of humanity. That stops now. Even if it costs you investor confidence? Especially then. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then, all right, I'm holding, but I'll be watching the follow-through. Fair enough, Williams said. The call continued for another 30 minutes. Questions about quarterly earnings, supply chain logistics, growth projections. The usual machinery of capitalism grinding forward. But Williams could feel the shift. Some investors pulling back, others leaning in, all of them recalibrating what kind of company Williams Dynamics was becoming. When the call ended, Williams sat in the silence of his office and pulled up the stock ticker. Down 3.4%. His phone buzzed. Lara, that was something. Legal is still drafting a risk memo, but you didn't make it worse. Another text from Richard Stokes. Stock's down. Told you. Board review is still on the table. Williams set the phone down and looked out at the city. Somewhere below, people were working. Overnight shifts starting, morning shifts ending. The constant churn of labor that kept the lights on and the buildings standing. His computer pinged. An email from the VP of Operations, FYI. Job applications are up 34% this week. People are citing the wellness policy in their cover letters. Another email from a supplier. Renewing our contract early. Your policy changes align with our values. Proud to partner with you. Williams read them twice, then opened the news alerts. Bloomberg, Williams Dynamics. Stock dips following controversial policy reversal. Forbes, CEO takes pay cut to fund worker wellness program. Stunt or substance? Fast Company. Robert Williams is rewriting corporate accountability. Will it work? The headlines split clean down the middle. Half skeptical, half cautiously optimistic. The market was doing what markets do, reacting, recalibrating, waiting to see if conviction translated to results. Williams closed the browser and stood. The town hall was tonight at 6 p.m. He'd be there, he'd listen, and he'd learn whether the people whose lives he'd disrupted believed any of this was real. Across the city, level 28, 5:30 p.m. Alicia pushed her cart down the glass corridor, earbuds in but no music playing. She'd listened to the shareholder call on a live stream during her break, sitting in the small rest area with her phone pressed to her ear, Williams's voice coming through tinny but clear. We're fixing risks. Fatigue, hunger, fear. She'd expected corporate speak, expected deflection and smooth reassurances that meant nothing. What she'd heard instead was a man absorbing anger, skepticism, and market pressure without retreating. It didn't make her trust him. Not yet. But it made her believe he might actually mean what he said. Her phone buzzed, the email from HR, still unanswered. Town hall invitation. Please confirm by 5 p.m. It was 5:32. Alicia stopped the cart and pulled out her phone. Her thumb hovered over the reply button. Speaking meant exposure, meant standing in front of executives, coworkers, maybe even press, and explaining what it felt like to be fired for being exhausted. Meant reliving the shame, the fear, the impossible calculation of insulin versus rent. But staying silent meant letting someone else tell her story. Meant letting the policy changes be about Williams's redemption instead of the workers who needed them. She thought about her mother's words. You showed up, baby. That's everything. She thought about Denise's casserole, Marco's grocery bag, Tomas's testimony, The way people had shown up for her when it cost them something. Maybe showing up was the only currency that mattered. Alicia typed quickly before she could change her mind. "I'll speak. Thank you for the invitation." She hit send and pocketed the phone. The corridor stretched ahead of her, glass and light, and the hum of a building that never stopped moving. In 3 hours, that building would fill with people waiting to hear whether any of this was real. And she would tell them the truth, that she was tired, that she'd almost lost everything, and that mercy shouldn't be revolutionary, it should be baseline. Her cartwheels squeaked slightly as she pushed forward. The sound echoed in the empty hallway, steady and persistent, like a heartbeat, like showing up, even when you're scared. The town hall was in 3 hours. Alicia didn't know yet what she'd say, but she knew she'd say something. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. The auditorium on Level 3 was designed for quarterly announcements and training seminars, not truth-telling. 200 folding chairs arranged in neat rows, a podium with the Williams Dynamics logo backlit in corporate blue, and a microphone that hummed with the particular frequency of amplified expectation. By 6 p.m., every seat was filled. Alicia stood in the back hallway, watching through the doorway as people settled in, overnight cleaning staff still in their jumpsuits, day shift managers in button-downs, security guards, maintenance workers, HR representatives with clipboards. The room was a cross-section of the building's invisible architecture. The people who made it run and the people who decided how it ran, all gathered in the same space for once. Sandra Ortiz from HR touched Alicia's elbow gently. "You'll go third, after Mr. Williams's opening remarks and the policy overview. Just speak from the heart. No script necessary." Alicia nodded, her throat dry. She'd rehearsed this a dozen times on the bus ride over, in the supply closet during her break, in the mirror of the employee bathroom. But now, standing at the threshold of being seen, every word felt inadequate. "You'll be great," Sandra said, and walked toward the front. Alicia stayed in the doorway, watching. Robert Williams stood near the podium, hands in his pockets, looking less like a billionaire CEO and more like someone bracing for impact. He caught her eye across the room and nodded once. Not encouragement exactly, but acknowledgement. "We're both in this now." Sandra took the podium. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. Tonight is about listening, learning, and moving forward together. Mr. Williams will open with remarks. Then we'll hear from those directly impacted by recent policy changes. This is a space for honest conversation." She stepped aside. Williams took her place. The room quieted. "I'm not going to give you a corporate speech," Williams began, his voice carrying without the microphone. "I'm not going to tell you everything is fine or that we've figured it all out, because we haven't. What I can tell you is this. Last week, I made a decision that violated my own zero-tolerance policy. I reversed a termination. I launched a pilot program without board approval. I reallocated funding from executive perks to worker wellness. And I did it because I finally looked at the systems we built and realized they were breaking people." He paused, letting the words settle. "Some of you are skeptical. You've been promised things before. You've watched policies get announced, and then quietly abandoned when they had become inconvenient. I understand that skepticism. I've earned it, so I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to hold me accountable. The micro-rest pods are installed. The freight elevator is repaired. The cafeteria is extending hours. The hotline is live. Those aren't promises. They're done. And if something isn't working, if a policy still punishes instead of protects, I want to hear about it." He looked toward the back of the room where Alicia stood. "But tonight isn't about me." It's about the people who've been carrying this company on their backs while we measured their worth in productivity metrics. One of those people is here to speak. I hope you'll listen the way I should have been listening all along." He stepped away from the podium. Sandra returned. "Alicia Kimes, please come forward." Alicia's legs moved before her brain caught up. She walked down the center aisle, feeling the weight of 200 pairs of eyes, feeling the corridor's glass walls closing in, even though she was surrounded by open air. She reached the podium. The microphone was too high. She adjusted it, the screech of feedback making her flinch. Then she looked out at the room. Denise sat in the third row, hands clasped tight. Marco beside her. Tomas near the back, still in uniform. Carmen Rodriguez from the night shift, whose email had made Williams cry, sat front row center. These were her people. Not because they were her friends, some she barely knew, but because they understood what it meant to work in the margins, to hold each other up when the system tried to grind them down. Alicia took a breath. "My name is Alicia Kimes," she said, her voice steadier than she expected. "I clean offices on the overnight shift. Last week, I was fired for sleeping on duty. 6 minutes. That's how long I closed my eyes after working 10 hours straight." The room was silent. "I want to be clear about something," Alicia continued. "I fell asleep because I was exhausted, not because I didn't care. I care a lot. About my mom, who needs me to pick up her insulin. About my coworkers, who cover for each other when buses break down or kids end up in the ER. About doing this job right, even when the building makes it hard." She saw Carmen nodding, saw Denise wipe her eyes. "When Mr. Williams fired me, I didn't argue. I accepted it because that's what you do when you're someone like me working in a place like this. You accept that the rules aren't designed for your exhaustion, your hunger, your life outside these walls. You accept that you're replaceable." Alicia's hands gripped the sides of the podium. But then something strange happened. Mr. Williams looked deeper. He asked questions. He reviewed the logs and saw that I wasn't lazy. I was covering shifts, that I wasn't careless. I was hypoglycemic and the cafeteria was closed. That the system punished me for circumstances it created. And he changed his mind. She paused, letting the weight of those words land. "I'm not here to thank the CEO," Alicia said, her voice quiet but firm. "I'm here to thank you, Denise, who trusted me to cover for her when her daughter needed her. Marco, who texted me when his bus broke down instead of just not showing up. Tomas, who testified to HR about what he saw. Carmen, who wrote an email that mattered. All of you who've ever swapped a 10-minute break like a life vest, who've walked each other to the bus when the city is still half asleep, who've shared food even when you barely had enough." Her voice cracked slightly. "That's what keeps us alive. Not policies, not pilot programs, each other. So I'm asking you, keep doing that. Keep looking out for each other. Because the system will fail us again. But if we don't fail each other, we'll survive it." Alicia stepped back from the microphone. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Carmen stood. Just stood, quiet and steady, hands at her sides. Denise stood. Then Marco. Then Tomas. One by one the room rose. Not applause, not theater, but a collective, deliberate standing up that said, "We see you. We're with you. We'll keep showing up." Alicia's eyes burned. She nodded once, professional as ever, and walked back down the aisle. When she reached her seat, Sandra was crying. Williams, standing against the side wall, had his arms crossed tight, his expression unreadable. The town hall continued. Questions, comments, a maintenance lead describing the new rest pods, an HR rep explaining the hotline. But the real work had already happened. A cultural turn, starting from the floor up. 2 weeks later, the corridor on level 28 looked the same but felt different. Williams stood at the window where it all began, watching the sunrise paint the glass in shades of gold and pale blue. Behind him, the building hummed with the overnight shift ending, the day shift beginning, the constant churn of labor and life. He walked past the small restroom where the door was closed, a red light blinking above it. Occupied. Someone was inside, resting, not hiding, not apologizing, just resting. The freight elevator was running, its doors opening and closing smoothly. A maintenance sticker on the wall, inspected and certified, priority service agreement in effect. Near the vending machines, a new station had appeared. A table with an electric kettle, boxes of tea, sleeves of crackers, a laminated sign that read, "Overnight Wellness Station, take what you need." On the bulletin board beside it, the hotline poster was already worn at the edges, phone number visible beneath layers of awareness. Williams stopped at the window and pulled a marker from his pocket. On the glass, someone had written years ago in dry erase ink, "Discipline drives excellence." It was his handwriting, his philosophy, the backbone of everything he'd built. He didn't erase it. Instead, he uncapped the marker and wrote beneath it in smaller, steadier script, "Mercy sustains it." Behind him, footsteps. He turned. Alicia walked past with her cart, earbuds in, eyes alert. She saw him, slowed, and pulled out one earbud. They looked at each other across the corridor, the space where everything had broken and begun to mend. Williams nodded once, professional, respectful. Alicia nodded back. No words, no gratitude theater, no redemption arc tied in a bow. Just two people who'd collided in the machinery of power and exhaustion and somehow found a way to build something better from the wreckage. Alicia replaced her earbud and kept walking, the cart wheels squeaking their steady rhythm against the polished floor. Williams watched her go, then turned back to the window. The city below was waking, cars threading through streets, construction cranes pivoting, people moving toward jobs and responsibilities, and lives that didn't stop for mercy, but desperately needed it. He thought about the shareholder call, the dipping stock, the board's threats. The stock had stabilized. Applications had surged. Suppliers had renewed contracts early, citing the policy changes. But the real measure wasn't in markets or metrics. It was in the red light blinking occupied, in the worn edges of the hotline poster, in the way Alicia Kimes walked through the building now, not invisible, not expendable, but seen. Williams's phone buzzed. A calendar reminder. Board meeting, 9 a.m. compensation review. He silenced it and looked one more time at the words on the glass. Discipline drives excellence. Mercy sustains it. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't finished. But it was true. And truth, Williams was learning, was the only foundation worth building on. He walked toward the elevator, leaving the corridor behind, bright and glass, and humming with the possibility of what mercy could build when it stopped being revolutionary and started being baseline. The building breathed around him, and for the first time in 20 years, it felt like home.